Hey everybody, it's Anna. Welcome back to my booktube channel. Today I was going to make kind of a chill video that's not just a book haul, but sort of some things that have come into my life recently, bookish and otherwise, I guess. Just some stuff that I have been enjoying and having fun with this summer. So some of it's going to be books, some of it's going to be book related, and I think some of it's just going to be stuff that I've been enjoying outside of all that. So I guess we can get started with the books. I was speaking recently to some friends that came to visit from out of town, and they're also big readers, as are my husband and I. And we were talking about like where do we get most of our books, and I still think I have about maybe half the books that I read are library books, but usually when Sean and I buy new books, we wind up getting used books. So they're like new to us, but not new necessarily. So most of the books that I'm going to show you are used. There are a few that I bought from Bookshop, either because they were new releases or because I wasn't really able to find a used copy since they came out relatively recently, but let's get into it. And most of these are actually from like local bookshops around here. So from the inimitable Viva Books, I picked up Murder in the Hellfire Club by Donald Zokert. This looks really interesting. It's kind of an alternate history story where Benjamin Franklin is a detective, and while he's sort of visiting London, he is the only person who sees this sort of death by accident for what it really is, which is an intentional death by murder. The cover is bonkers with him like riding into this sort of bawdy house on a bolt of lightning, and I had never heard of this book or this author before, but as you know, I have been revisiting a lot of my favorite mystery series, and I thought this would be a fun thing to try out. So haven't started it yet, but that's Murder in the Hellfire Club. A couple of these next ones are the ones that I purchased from Bookshop. So first up we have Rachel Carson's book Under the Sea Wind. This is the Centennial Edition, which confused me at first because the book was published first in 1941, and I was thinking to myself, how can it be the Centennial if the book hasn't even been out for 100 years yet? Then I figured out it was the Centennial of Rachel Carson's birth. She was born in 1907. This edition with its new introduction was published in 2007. And it is kind of this beautiful synthesis of natural history and poetry. She's writing about different animals that exist in the ecosystems of the sea, going everywhere from the shore, estuaries, wetlands and marshes, through to, the water, and then much further into the sort of deep water of the ocean. I knew about Rachel Carson because of her environmentalist work, Silent Spring, which is one of the sort of appeals to the public for environmentalism that helped catalyze things like the Endangered Species Act here in the United States. I did not know that she wrote a trilogy about the ocean and the sea, which is super awesome because that's kind of my favorite place to be. And Sean's actually reading a book right now that is a book about great books of the last, 200 years, something like that. So each chapter in that book is about a book that was really important in our relatively recent history. And he's been picking up a lot of good reads that way, and I had to pick this one up as well. Okay, next up we have Pink-Pilled Women in the Far Right by Lois Shearing. I want to say, I did have to get this one new. This was going to be a Patreon book club pick for Hannah Witten's channel, but it's published by Manchester University Press, and I couldn't get it in the US for a while. And I guess it eventually got released here, but too late for the book club, but it's a book that I still really wanted to read. One of my favorite reads and books that stuck with me from earlier this year was Blackpilled by Elle Reeve, which is about the sort of internet to alt-right radicalization pipeline for men, particularly men in the United States. And I know that this is written by a British author, so I am very curious to kind of read this, how this radicalization pipeline happens from a different gender perspective, because I'm following it a little bit and know kind of what it's like more so in the US than I think in the UK, but it's definitely very different in the way that this sort of propaganda tends to affect women, and I want to read more about that. And also, I really liked Lois Shearing's books that she's written about bisexuality, so I know I like the author. Definitely a plus there. And then a book that doesn't really need any introduction from me, but that I did buy new, was The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. This is Ocean Vuong's most recent novel. I have heard some mixed reviews coming out about this, but it is also an Oprah Book Club pick 2025, so I wonder if the mixed reviews are because the book is not as good as Vuong's previous work, or if it's just because it's seeing like a wider readership, and that could be kind of affecting the tenor of those reviews. I don't know anything about the plot of this book. I just know that I really, really like Ocean Vuong's writing about like queerness and what it means to be like queer and masculine in America. I was lucky that I got to meet him actually at a book event that he did for On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, and that's a book that I think I can genuinely say changed my life. So, looking forward to reading this regardless of my final thoughts. Okay, let's get back to the used books. So, I usually get my used books from a combination of used bookstores in person and online, but I have recently started picking up some of my used books from places like eBay, Depop. Depop I didn't really think would sell so many used things that aren't just clothes, because like I started out using that as like a secondhand fashion company, you know, as a way to get more affordable vintage clothing or stuff that was made with more natural materials, not like fast fashion gonna fall apart. But there are a lot of books that are listed there too, and I think this one was either from there or from eBay, I'm not sure. But this is The Language of the Night, Essays on Fantasy and Science Fiction by Ursula K. Le Guin, edited and with introductions by Susan Woods. So Ursula K. Le Guin's one of my very favorite authors. I do have a goal one day to collect all of her books. I know that's probably going to take me most of my life because she wrote a lot. And for things like the essays and the short stories, they've been anthologized in many different volumes over the years, many different collections over the years. But this is an anthology that I have not yet read. I've read a few more of her more recent ones, but this was, let's see, copyright 1979. So it's entirely possible that I have read a couple of the essays that are in here, which was very sweet. Here was another thing that I love about ordering things used or like finding things from small businesses and sellers online is they always write you like such nice little notes, and they even sent me this little postcard of Dale Chihuly floating some of his blown glass, which I find amazing because I used to live in Seattle, which is where the Dale Chihuly Museum is, and it was just kind of a nice little, oh, that was like a reminder of home. So I will probably be dipping in and out of this book slowly. Her writing is pretty dense and meant to be savored, so I'll probably just read like an essay here and there, but I will update you as I do. And then we have the final 4 books I picked up from a used bookstore in Seattle, based in Seattle, which I love. They are called Paper Portal Used Books. They are run by Cameron, who is a super awesome, fantastic bookseller. He was running it solely as a brick and mortar store for a while, but has since switched over to being an online / hybrid at pop-ups in the Seattle area. Rent in the Seattle area is ridiculous for residential, commercial. Basically, you have to already come from money or have like a ridiculous amount of money to be able to afford property there or to afford to stay in property there. So I have, been an avid supporter of that bookshop because it's great and his curation is awesome. And I'm waxing eloquent about it right now because if you are also interested in reading a lot of the same books that I do or from that same period, he does a phenomenal job of sourcing different books. So I'm going to link his bookshop below in the description, as well as Viva Books, which is based in Baltimore. But I would really love to see his project continue to succeed, even though sadly I cannot go to the pop-ups because I don't live there anymore. So Paper Portal does a lot of like classic science fiction and fantasy. So I picked up, that was everything that I picked up from here. And they had a sale because they had just like opened the full online bookstore. So these are the 4 books that I got from there. This is The Non-Existent Knight and The Cloven Viscount, which are two short novels by Italo Calvino. He's this Italian surrealist writer whose work I really love. He writes a lot about like what is the point of fiction and literature and stories, but he does it in this really interesting hybrid style of fiction that's kind of like fairy tale meets it's written like it's real life, like a travel log or a guidebook in some ways. I have already read The Non-Existent Knight. It is quite literally about an empty suit of armor that is a knight, and it's kind of a parody of chivalric romance and stuff like that. And he's just like an empty suit of armor that goes on quests, and it's satirizing that entire genre of literature. So I loved it. I definitely want to reread this, and I have not read The Cloven Viscount, but knowing that I love this author, I'm sure I'm really going to enjoy it. Okay, next up is Tolkien, A Look Behind the Lord of the Rings by Lynn Carter. The subtitle here is A Joyous Exploration of Tolkien's Classic Trilogy and of the Glorious Tradition from Which It Grew. So there's no shortage of Tolkien scholarship over here, especially as we are a very Lord of the Rings loving household. But this was published in 1969, so it would have been right around the time that the books were becoming more widely available in the US. And I'm interested to like read and see what people were saying about those books at the time they were coming out. All right, next is going to be my first long-form work by Tanith Lee, which is Quest for the White Witch. Tanith Lee is a sort of like classic, but I believe underappreciated fantasy author that I actually learned about thanks to C.S.E. Cooney, who's the author of Saint Death's Daughter, a book which I absolutely loved. It was just like this cornucopia of language and magic and bizarre fun, and she cited Tanith Lee as a major inspiration for her work as a fantasy writer. This dates back to, oh, it's a first printing. Wow, cool. February 1978. And I just read the back of it. Seems like a pretty straightforward fantasy book, but I'm sure it's going to be written amazingly. So I'm looking forward to that. And then finally, we have kind of an omnibus book here, this absolutely beautiful hardcover, The Fantasy Worlds of Peter Beagle by Peter Beagle, and it contains 4 of his books, Lila the Werewolf, The Last Unicorn, Come Lady Death, and A Fine and Private Place, complete in one volume. This is one of my favorite writers. The Last Unicorn is one of my favorite books of all time, and then the follow-up, The Way Home, literally brought me to tears when I read it. I've been meaning to read a lot more of his work, and The Last Unicorn is the only one of the books on this list I have actually read. So this is going to be a really good one for me to just enjoy savoring over time. And it's also in great condition. Cameron takes such good care with the hardcovers, especially. This is like all nice and wrapped up in dust jacket protector, and it's going to last me a very long time. Okay, so those are all of the sort of books that I have bought that have come into my life recently. I'm not going to do this for all the library books that have come into my life recently because, number one, you will hear about them when I wrap them up, and number two, we would be here all day, and I'm just like, no, that's too much. But one last thing I did want to share is that I brought another sort of bookish thing into my life, and that is a little Ex Libris sticker. So it's got my name on it, and it is from my books. And it's just a lady reading a book inside an alligator's mouth, which was perfect for me. I grew up in Florida. I find these animals incredible and fascinating. This is actually how big the stamp is. It's a lot bigger than I thought it would be. It's maybe like Post-it note size, and I thought it would maybe be about half that size. So I'm gonna have to get really creative with my positioning of this stamp as I stamp my books. But I just think that's so much fun. It's gonna basically be like when I would write my name in my books as a kid. Yeah, I think the main other big new thing that's come into my life relatively recently is actually kind of a return to an old thing. And it's partially because I wanted to get some exercise that I can do while I'm pregnant, so it needed to be something that was like non-contact and relatively easygoing. And also partially because we are having climate change, terrible turbocharged heat waves, which are preventing me from being outside as often as I would like, because my temperature control is already not great under normal circumstances. And then when you add pregnancy into the mix, it's just not what it used to be. So what I have returned to doing is something that I have enjoyed very much in the past, and that's swimming. I just took out a membership at my YMCA nearby, and I go to their pool and swim laps probably a couple times a week. I'm not like training for speed or distance or anything like that. Just trying to focus on getting some good gentle exercise, working on my technique, just feeling good, working up like a good sweat. And that's really enjoyable. I used to swim a lot when I was a kid. Like I said, grew up in Florida, so it was always the beach or the pool every weekend in summer and, around that. I swam on my childhood-wise summer swim team. We were the Waves, which was very fun. And I also taught swim lessons as my first job and coached the younger kids in swim team as I got older, high school, college. So it's definitely been nice to return to that as an adult. So there you have it. These are all the new books that have come into my life recently and some of the other bookish or otherwise enjoyable things. I hope you all are doing well. I hope you are staying cool if you are currently experiencing the Northern Hemisphere hellhole that is this summer, and that you are enjoying your summer reads. And thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.